Now in this one here, I'm just going to go over the general concept, the design, some measurements, and it was a lot of trial and error how to figure out what mechanisms would work this. But I'll get some of the concepts to you here in this little short video, tell you how I put it together, the steps I took to put it together, and then in the later videos or the other videos I will show in this series, I'll show you how I made the gears, how I made the wheels, and then you'll better understand how I put it together afterwards. So the measurements on this, from this corner to this corner, is 23 1/4 inches. Now you can make whatever size you want. I was just going off memory and trying to replicate roughly the Bisset scoreboards. So if you look them up and get some images, they're even hard to find images of those. Especially it's hard to find out. I couldn't find anything on their mechanisms, how they worked. So I had to figure that part out. But I'm going off memory as best I could remember and best using them before. I know that their wheels were smaller than these. They used to be about this size, but leaving that, I just made it this size here. So 23 1/4 inches and by 15 1/4 inches height. Each of these interior wheels here that spin separately, every single one of these are 6 1/2 inches wide diameter, okay? The little gears that are behind, back in here, those gears are 3 1/4 inches wide, half the diameter of the larger wheels. And as you can see, just if I press here a little bit, I left about 1/8 of an inch back up in here. There's about 1/8 of an inch not showing. So you get a nice closed in feeling. You don't see the big gap there. This is just a little, these holes, 3/4 inch holes, okay? And then I left a little bit more space here for the fingers. So 3/4 of an inch here. These here are probably, anywhere from, let's say 7/8, maybe 7/8 across here. Something like that. It's not a full inch. And I made this hole a little larger so I could paint in here a little easier. Okay? From here to here, whichever direction you go in, these 7 1/4 inches in the distance. These are lined up straight across here. These are lined up straight across here. I took this as a square, or a rectangle I should say. I took this as a rectangle and I centered it on this board as best I could. Okay? So that's how I did it. And I didn't drill the holes in this here first. I didn't drill the holes. Okay, I left them blank. I left this blank. Okay. I put my center points on here. So I put my center points on there. This front and this back are exactly the same size. I clamped them together. And then I drilled a hole for the corner supports, which is just 2x2s back here, probably smaller than 2x2s. But I drilled a hole through here, which also went through the back in the exact same spot. About a 1/8 inch hole. Just a pilot hole basically. Same thing here on each of the corners. And then through all the center points here, which I had marked out, so while these two were clamped together, I drilled a pilot hole all the way through. That way then I knew that the back and the front would line up once they had to be separated to put the gears inside. It also gave me the pilot holes. Later on I will show you where to put the dowels, which these spin on. So what makes the axles for these wheels are 3/4 inch dowels. And that's why if you come back here, after I put the pilot holes in, each one of these were the back end of that, and I knew the back and the front would be lined up perfectly. All right. Once I had this system together, and I'll show you how I put the gears together And I had my positive stop mechanisms put in place so that when this wheel spun, it would stop at very specific points. There is 10 cogs on each of these gears, so I knew I had 10 numbers to work with. So it would positive stop on a number, a digit, right? It'd do a positive stop on 10 digits all the way around. So once I knew that, I could come here. I would remember now these holes weren't cut out yet inside here for your fingers. So what I would do is I would spin the wheel from behind. When it got a positive stop, I would mark, that's where I would drill the first hole, right? Then I would spin it again for another positive stop, and then I knew I had to drill another hole right here. So that's how I managed to do this. So you always got a perfect stop every time. Right? Now a little harder because this is where it comes to spin two of them. And once I knew which mechanism would affect this gear to turn, well, once I got around like this, and that's where I knew this one was going to make the next gear, then I knew this was number 1, or 0 in this case. So that's 0, right? So I could mark a 0 in there, because now I'm at the point which this gear engages this one. Right? And it's going to affect it. So that's how I could do this. That way your holes are all perfectly in place. You can paint your numbers in here exactly where you need them. Okay? They'll always show up every time. So that's how that works. All right? This width right here, I left this because I cut this piece out. I drew my straight line through here. Then, let's say for example this one. I measured from my center point, which I had a pilot hole. So I knew this was 6.5 inches. So I measured out here 6, and I go an eighth less. So about an eighth of an inch or a 16th, whatever you want. I measured that a little bit less. I put my compass on here, drew my circle. Then I moved back in here, a little bit bigger than 3/4 of an inch, so I'd have lots of width for my finger. I marked that one and I drew the circle. And then when I knew this is where I wanted my number 1, my positive stop to be, and I knew roughly the width in here, so I would just have that width between these two holes. Then I just, with freehand, I just drew a little line across here like that, and like that. That's what I left, and I cut the rest out with a jigsaw. Okay? And I drilled this through with a spade bit. So, very, very simple, you know, how it's done. And then you just repeat the same thing for each of these. When you put your dowels in behind, because you had your pilot hole straight through, everything would line up. Then you just begin the final task. Now it's a little bit of dismantling, be able to drill the holes properly, put it back together again, you know, that kind of stuff. But you could easily mark out each one of them. You didn't have to like mark one and take it out and drill it. You could move to your positive stop, mark where that hole should be, move to your positive stop, mark where that hole should be, move to your positive stop, mark where that hole should be, until you got them all done, right? And then you take the thing apart. You do it for all of these. Just take the top off again. It's only a couple of screws. Drill your holes. You could drill them in place, but it makes a lot of mess. Put it all back together again. Put it back together again. I knew this is where the last gear was before it turns this. Draw my 0. Move it. Draw my 1. You know, you get the idea. Okay? So that's the concept. There'll be a few videos now on how I cut the gears and how we put it all together.